Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 39 of ZK Live. This is our first time experimenting with a new platform. We're on PCA Live right now. We are recording with fancy new microphone, and nothing is going according to plan, except for we have the wonderful Steve Baczek here with us. Hi, Steve.
What's up, bud? How you doing tonight?
I'm doing wonderful, and I'm really grateful that you took the time to talk with me about all the things building science and coatings. And I've heard your story on other podcasts. We've talked before. I'm excited for people to get to know what you're all about.
Awesome.
So why don't we just start by giving us like a brief rundown of who you are and how you got to be where you are today. Then we go
Yeah.
deeper, I guess.
Yeah. So my name's Steve Baczek. I'm a registered architect. Been in business for myself for 16 years now. Been at the business of architecture for probably close to 30 years. And one of my big um, helps along the way, I guess, or the biggest part of my education was the fact that I worked at Building Science Corporation for almost 10 years. And, spent a lot of time taking buildings apart, and it's hard not to gain a great deal of knowledge when you're, walking around with the likes of Joe Stiebrick and Coda and Peter Yost every day, so it it gave me an education as an architect that I can't imagine there's many architects in the country that have that kind of building science education.
Yeah, you were
It's
able to like
very unique.
combine. Yeah, you were able to combine many years of failures that weren't even your failures by just studying failure all the time. I feel like that's where I learned so much is through seeing failure, and you got to accelerate
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and like you said, the best part is it was none of my risk, right? We were taking apart buildings, and I was learning how other people failed, and the things that they didn't think about, the things that they didn't worry about, the things that they worried about that they maybe shouldn't have, and then the things that they didn't worry about that they probably should have. So understanding the priorities, and honestly, I think, I get asked all the time, what do you think the biggest problem with our industry is? And my answer is always the same, in that I don't think we have a good sense of what questions to ask, right? We're always striving for, give me the answer, but we're not really understanding how we arrive at that answer. We don't know what questions it took to get there, right? We just kind of want to get beamed up. We want to go from point A to point Z, but we don't really want to understand how we got there. And that's the important thing, right? It's kind of like, I don't know, synonymous with a painter that shows up and he just wants to put the finished coat on and have it look nice. He doesn't understand that the prep and all the things that go into it and all those questions are the reason for success. So, you just translate that and kind of scale that up and you have building science.
Yeah, my favorite teacher in high school taught. He was like an old school guy, and he would teach us about the importance of understanding concepts and not just the data, so that we could get the right answer on a multiple choice test. And it was such a valuable way for me to look at learning. As it's what I try to teach my team now, is like we're trying to understand the concepts that underpin what we're doing, so that when things are different from job to job, we can still know what we're doing and adapt, and not just be like, well, when I show up, I do X, Y, and Z every single time, and not knowing why you do that, so that if X is a little different this time, or you don't do Y, that you still end up with like the complete package. And concepts versus like the specifics, I think, is kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, because when you have the understanding, then I have the ability to either push forward or make a left turn, make a right turn, and adapt and be flexible. But if I don't know what the issue at hand is, if someone just gives me the answer and says, here, build it like this detail and I really don't know what I'm looking at, then how can I ever improve that detail? I'm stuck just using it for that set of conditions.
Yeah. Yeah. When you were working at the Building Science Corporation and you were looking at buildings that were failing, because that's what primarily what is Building Science
I mean, it
Corporation?
was,
What do they do?
yeah, I mean, they do building investigations. Obviously, Joe travels around the country. I think he's um, laid it down a little bit, but I mean, in the heyday, he was traveling. I mean, he was in a different major city every day talking about building science. And one of the things I think that's pretty interesting, Zach, is, Instagram and all the social media is huge now, and people are posting pictures about things like a Rainscreen or vapor retarder, and they're posting it like they invented it. And the reality is, I can pick literally the day where I sat down with Peter and Joe and we talked about that Rainscreen principle back in 96 or 98. And the reality is Joe would cite it as, this is what Gus Handegord taught him from, building science that he did in the 60s and 70s. And so Joe didn't even play it off as this was Joe's idea. It was, this is how the Canadians did it. And Gus Handegord talked about it in the 70s that Joe learned from. But people, there's a lot of people out there that think they're inventing the wheel, which I find pretty interesting.
I
But that's okay.
Definitely, and I think that's that rain screen thing. So I had Kyle Mock come up to a project of ours, and we did that, and I was like blown away. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever, because and we're actually, I just talked to Kyle today, and he's coming out to another project of ours next week to look at, because I want to build my paint jobs on a solid foundation, and I'll get blamed if the paint fails later. And so a lot of times, so on that project that we did the rain screen on, I looked at it and I was like, there's there's an exterior panel that's touching the top of a window frame. And I don't understand how that makes sense. And it's already starting to have some failure. And this is a 4-month-old building. I don't want to
Hmm.
scrape and repaint this and then have him come back at me. So luckily I had met Kyle, and I got to have him come out, and he detailed for us how to repair it. And I posted about it. And I was like, I was like so amazed. I did not take any credit for it. I'm a painter. I don't know what the heck do I know. I gave Kyle all the credit, but I didn't know to call it rain screen until someone like commented on the post. But that idea that because for a long time, I, as a painter, I'm like, I got to keep water out at all costs, to the point where
Yeah.
when I was younger, I caulked the underneaths of a bunch of clapboards one time when I was like, I don't know, 19 years old, probably working for a painter. And I was like super detail oriented, and I wanted all the shadow lines to go away. And I caulked this like archway above a garage, like in perfectly. Well, like 6 months later, all the paint peeled off. And that was my
Yeah.
education as to buildings needing to breathe.
Yeah.
So I
So,
would imagine you see stuff like that a lot.
yeah. And the minute somebody pulls out a caulk gun, my, my, what you call it, concept that I pass on to them is, do not ask yourself what you're sealing out. Ask yourself what you're sealing in, because the building's not going to fail because the caulk allowed just a little water in. Most of the time, it's going to fail because it didn't let a lot of the water out, and that's the problem. Is that things get wet. I won't say who, but kind of a nationally recognized builder at a national um, conference was doing a demonstration, and he was caulking the clapboards to the inside corner. And I raised my hand and said, "Why would you do that?" And he said, "Well, it's to keep the water out." And I said, "Well, what about the water that gets in?" He says, "Well, that's why I'm doing it, so no water gets in." And in front of like 200 people, I said, I respect you, but I think you're pretty naive to think water's never getting behind that clapboard side, because it
Yeah.
is, and it will. And once it gets in, all you've done is prevented it to come out. I very rarely use, any caulking on a job unless I'm using it for air sealing. But we try and I do a lot of open joint rain screens. So I turn the cladding, literally put 1x6s and space them on the wall and make the whole wall air open. And
which
I
is
welcome
a
the water.
fascinating concept. I love that idea.
Yeah.
We were talking about it today as I was talking about this other project. The idea that you're like instead of trying to keep water out, which is obviously a fool's errand and is incredibly difficult, and if one little tiny amount of water gets in someplace, well, it has no place to go out now because you've
Right.
not planned for it. The idea of this rain screen thing of like I'm here, I'm gonna like plan where the water comes in, and I'm gonna plan where the water goes out. Um, I love it. It makes me
And
happy
I'm
as a
going to plan
painter
how to
because
dry it. I'm going to plan
yes,
how to dry
yes,
it, right? Should
yeah,
it get in? And this should be a key to everybody. I mean, take the top 5 smartest minds in building science and listen to them talk. You will never hear any one of them call it a water barrier. They call it water management, and they call it water management for a reason, because you're naive if you think you're building a water barrier. Water will get in, water will create problems if you don't provide a managed way to get rid of the water.
and
And here, you're a
as a
painter.
painter,
How about this? I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I was going to say, how's this for an anecdotal story? Probably about, I don't know, it was probably close to 4 years now. I was in a neighborhood of a house that I designed and worked on at Building Science Corporation back in, say, I don't know, probably 98. So what's that? It probably puts it in the 18-year mark. And I was driving by, the wife, homeowner, was there. So I stopped. She remembered me. We chatted, and I said, "Man, the house looks beautiful." And I was like, "Did you just repaint it?" She goes, "We haven't repainted it yet." And it was close to its 18th year, and it looked
That's tremendous.
stunning. And the reason is the paint never gets challenged, right? The water gets in and it has a place to go. I mean, the whole reason that paint fails is because water tries to dry out through it. And the
Yep,
first barrier it sees is the paint film. And, paints are really good, but they win the first 4 or 5 battles, but then they start to blister. And the blister gets larger and larger, and then ultimately the blister bursts. And you have paint failure. And all that is just moisture trying to get to the outside. That's all it is. It's
it's
Joe would always
crazy.
say, I quote him, it's not rocket science, it's building science. It's ninth grade physics. It's not, we're not reinventing the wheel here. Water gets in, water needs to get out.
Yeah,
You know,
I
it,
think
it is
it's
that simple.
interesting because as a painter, like a lot of times painters in my business, like people will have their anecdotal evidence of like, well, I've done it that way and it worked. But rarely is that evidence coming from, oh, I went back 18 years later and looked at it and it looked good. They're saying, well, I
Right,
didn't get a call back. And a lot of times that's because they called another painter to come in and fix the peeling paint
right,
3 years later, right? So you don't know. And a lot of times the paint, at least in my experience, we're looking at like, oh, I have this thing and I need to make it look good so I can get paid. And so caulking gets put in, smeared in spots where caulking probably shouldn't be smeared in spots. And, all of those things happen. And did it look good the day you walked away? 100%. But I don't think there's a ton of painters who do a lot of work on on the same properties over the course of a 15-year period. I don't think
right,
it's super common. And so we don't see the repercussions of our like mistakes, I guess.
right.
The same way that you would as an architect where you're held to a higher standard.
Yep, yep. Yeah, I mean, I have a number. My own personal house here. I have all my cedar clapboards are on a 3/4 inch rain screen. We're probably in year 9, and they look like, if I told you I painted it last year, you'd be like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I love that
You know,
idea. The
it's
sentence that you just said about the paint not being stressed or strained. I love that concept. I've never thought of it that way. But yeah, like if
mhm.
there's no moisture pressure at all, yeah, you're not like you've not stressed your paint job, and it makes sense that it's going to last a lot longer.
Yeah. When you think about it, I mean, before we had kilns, how did we dry boards? We put them out in the lumber yard on sticks, and we dried it. So that's all I'm doing to the siding on a house. I'm putting it on a set of sticks and say, for the next 100 years, just dry out there. We'll paint you pretty on one side, but just dry. And that's what it's doing. It's just drying.
It's tremendous, and I wish there was more of it, more of that stuff happening, because so much of the painting industry is just scrape the loose stuff, spot prime it, and repaint it, and chase your tail
Hmm.
every 4 years, over and over and over again. That's just standard in my industry. Um, and I
Yeah.
think based off of what I've been learning recently, a lot of that stuff could just be prevented by the house being built better.
Yeah. And I have those conversations with, the homeowners that I work with. I say I would put it on a rain screen if it was my house. And the builder says, well, to add a rain screen is $8,000. And the homeowner's like, oh my God, $8,000. I said, okay, how much? Then I look at the builder and say, okay, how much to repaint this house? Or how much to paint the house initially? And he says, oh, I don't know, it's like 16K. And I say, okay, what's the average? 6, 7 years we repaint it. So if we put it on a rain screen and we last 18 years, that's, you know, 3 or 4 paint jobs in that time frame. So you pay 8,000 to save 45. So it's an investment. It's not a cost. And I'm not trying to put painters out of business by any means. But it's crazy how some people look at it, and everybody wants to build to their last dollar. And the other sad part of our industry is we have knowledge on how to build very well. We have it. It's here. We have data. We have understanding to build energy-free homes, to put paint on houses that'll last 20 years, et cetera, et cetera. We choose not to because there's always somebody, and I'm sure you find this, right? There is always a painter that's going to do it for less. Oh yeah,
A
you
hundred
don't you,
percent.
you don't need to put you don't need to put that on. Oh, you don't need to use that. That's expensive paint. You don't need this paint works just as good. I mean, all those
My
things. I get the
my
same with
laptop is about
architecture.
to die. I made a huge planning error. 1 second, let me plug it in before it dies, and then we'll keep. I love this conversation.
There we go.
So, to your point, there's always someone cheaper. There's always someone who's willing to do it for cheap. That's kind of what you were getting at, right?
Right.
That
Yeah, I mean, there's always somebody that's willing to, let's just say, not do it right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
There's a minimum level for any system. I mean, for paintings and coatings, there's a minimum level of stuff that you have to do to get an acceptable result. And, part of that is, the prep work and sanding and filling and all of that stuff and using the right primer and putting it on at the right temperature and all these variables. If you choose to not acknowledge them, then the system doesn't work. It breaks down.
yeah.
And there's always somebody that is willing to not play along with the system. And that's true of any profession: carpentry, architecture, anything. It's we have bad in everything, and we have good in everything. So
Some of
um,
it is malicious bad, and some of it's just ignorant bad. At
yeah,
least,
and painting is one of those things that I don't think gets the due respect that it deserves. Like, everybody thinks they can be a freaking painter, right? I mean, from the homeowner to the builder, or just, oh, I'll just have my guys paint that room. And it's like the two cheapest guys. You think because you give them a roller that, yeah, they can paint that room. And it's not until you see a really professional job that you go, wow, now I understand what I've been missing. right? Because that's, I mean, those rails that you showed today, I mean, you can comb your hair in them.
Yeah.
You know, not everybody can do that, you know, and to be able to do that, it's somebody that understands what they're doing. And that's what we should all strive for. We should all strive to be the best at what we're doing
Yeah.
and
And
consistently try to understand it.
like we just paint things.
Right.
Um, I'm not trying to be a builder and do painting or even a carpenter. Like we do some very minimal carpentry stuff, replacing things in kind. And
Yeah.
even then it's like, hey, Kyle, give me a detailed spec. And I'm calling Kyle like every 2 minutes, like, hey, I'm thinking, yep, that's the way to do it. How thick should my like straps be? All right. Yep. Hey, because I don't know how, like, and I'm not going to ever try to reinvent the wheel on something I don't know anything about. And
Yeah.
and I understand that I don't know, and I think it's important to stay in your lane.
Right.
That's why we have
But you'll
architects.
probably, yeah, well, but all of us, and I think you'll agree with this too, is that if you if you paint the next house the same way you painted the last house, then you're probably not doing your job, right?
Yeah,
Because there's something that you're going to experience and learn from that you should improve. And it's the same with me as an architect. It's the next time I design that house or that wall assembly, something will change. There's something about it that I will have learned from the last job that, suggests, hey, this is, going to be better than the last time.
yeah. What are some of
Lexi,
so
bring up
when
my
you were
phone
working?
charger.
Yeah, right. We both have the issue now.
Yeah, my phone just gave me the 15-minute. Well, I was expecting to do it on the computer and I ended up on my phone. So my
Oh,
phone has
sorry.
just
I
gave me
know
the
mine gave me a
15% warning.
6% warning, and within finishing that thought, it was already gone.
Yeah.
That was a huge mistake on my part, though. I should have known better. First time doing the podcast not from my phone on a
Yeah.
tripod, and I have that down to a science.
But hence our
Um,
conversation. You'll never do that again.
Never do it again. And as
Right?
long as you can learn from your mistakes, that what more can
Yeah,
you ask for?
exactly. You can't. I mean, what did what did I say? That it said that because we mistake, or I forget exactly how it goes, but there was a saying that went something like, because we make mistakes, that proves there's a God, because they can only be the one that's perfect or something, you know. So there was something
Yeah,
to that.
it's sometimes when you make those mistakes, make a mistake. It's nice to at least take some solace in that, like that's being human, and especially when you get.
Yeah.
I mean, both of us are high level craftspeople in what we do. Like, right, we spent our lives doing this, and when mistakes happen, sometimes it can be that much more painful because in the moment for me, I know there's times where I'm like, I should have known better. I should have. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, all right, cut it out. Like you had your pity party. What are you going to
Yep.
do
Yep.
different next time so that it doesn't happen
Right.
again?
Or the fact that it's like when you're bowling, right? Leaning. You think you can will the bowling ball. It's the same with a mistake. It's like, I know this probably isn't the right way, but I think this one time it's going to work for me. And we try and will it into success. And lo and behold, the system always wins, right? You can't will it into success. So, but we try. And it's really interesting for me now. I'm at an extremely exciting point in my life because my daughter just graduated architecture school and came on to work with me. So she's experiencing all these things that it's great that I'm here to help her experience it, because I went through these things and pretty much learned them by myself, right? So I made tons of mistakes, and I look back at some of my first designs and say, yeah, I mean, I'm great. grateful that I didn't charge that much there, because I probably would have never done that today. But they were happy, and things worked out. I mean, it's fine. But the fact that she's there now and the questions she's asking are exactly the same questions I had 25 years ago. And except she has somebody that has an answer, or I can even kind of project, what she's going to be doing in the next day or two. And I'm like, just don't even go down that path. Go here. Because if you go down that path, this is where you're going to end up. So let's just not even waste those 5 hours, and let's do this. Right. So, and occasionally she pushes back, but that's good, because that's how she's going to learn too. But it's very exciting times because I'm teaching her, but I'm kind of reliving my career, and it's bringing back a whole bunch of memories and stuff. So it's great times.
That's so cool. Congratulations.
No,
To have your daughter be part of the company. I heard you on the Modern Craftsman say that, and I was like, that's pretty cool. Because I
yeah,
think because you from what I understood, you let her do her thing, and she's like decided she wants to come work with you now. Has she's
yep,
worked other
yep.
places?
I mean, just her summer co-op jobs and stuff. But um, she wants to do what I do, and she likes it. And I mean, she grew up pretty much. I mean, ever since she was about 5, I've had my business. So she's only ever known, Dad's out front in his office doing his thing, and now
Yeah.
she's out in the front office in another desk doing her thing. And I do commend her immensely, because her whole time in college, it would have been very easy to say, "Hey, Dad, can you build a model of this? Can you do?" She didn't let me touch a thing. So everything that she accomplished, and she was at the top of her class, she did exceptionally well, but it was all her. So I'm very proud of her. So,
That's tremendous.
and and I also have my son. My son's in his third year of 5 years in architecture school. So I tease my daughter, and I tell her, I said, we got 2 years to get you up and running, and then your brother is all you, and you have to train him, because Mom and I will be, sailing in Hawaii or something.
Well, some of the most successful companies, especially in my trade, in the painting business, some of the most successful painting companies I know of are second generation companies. So,
Right.
based off kind of what you're talking about, and they've all sort of, that platform that you've built is the hard. Like I would argue, because I'm building it just like you built it. I think it's harder to start. Right, you have to start from
Yep.
scratch. You have to build all that stuff. Like what I had to go through to build from scratch it's much more difficult than taking a working machine. Like I'm building a machine, taking a
Yep.
working machine, and then like souping it up. I'm always like, at least because that's from my position, it's like I'm always envious of people who have gotten to do that, because there's always going to be the generational differences. There's going to be the technology differences, the mindset change of just like the mindset that's good at building the machine isn't maybe not as good at souping the machine up. So it's cool to think about your kids coming in and taking this awesome machine that you've built and like running with it. At least I'm having an enjoyable time thinking about it. You might be like, oh no.
No. And there's, the biggest thing for me with that, I try and pass on to her, is there's this legitimacy factor, right? I mean, when I started out, I was doing a garage edition. I was doing a garage and mudroom edition, family room edition, redoing this kitchen. And, now I'm doing, $4 or $5 million home, so it's a different scale. And now she's working with me, and we're working on, $1 million homes, or homes that just have a really good budget. We're not doing necessarily garages and stuff. So she doesn't quite know the pain of getting there. And it's the same, with a painter, I'm sure. It's like you don't create ZK painting, and then all of a sudden, someone's saying, "Hey, I have this 8,000 square foot house. Let me trust you with it." I see you got your painter's cap, so
Yeah.
let's have at it, right? You have to build that up, and so you get that legitimacy, and now she walks onto the scene, and so she gets that, she inherits that legitimacy.
It's like
because
rocket fuel.
yeah.
It's
I mean, it
rocket
was no
fuel
different
if she
than,
wants to use it.
yeah. And it was no different than when I went to a conference with Joe from Building Science. You walk in the door with Joe and him chatting with you, people are like, oh my God, that's Steve. He works with Joe. It's like, you didn't even have to be
Yeah,
smart. You just had to walk in the door with him. Right. And there was this instant legitimacy that was by association,
yeah,
so, which is, cool. It's cool. But the building of it is exciting. And, and I want to say it was perfect timing, but it would probably always seem like that. But it was getting to the point where it's like, you do this for 27 years and you're like, man, some of this stuff is just getting old. Dealing with clients, having this, having that, or having to chase down this payment, things like that. But then, she pops in and then it's this whole renewed life because it's like, hey, we gotta get this rocking and rolling really good now because there's two of us. And we do that. And I think, you touched upon it, that when you're starting it yourself, the challenges is that, you're, aside from painting, there's a whole business of how to understand clients, choosing the right clients, how to bill, right? How do I get my money out of this, right? How do I make sure that I'm painting on their money and not painting on my money? So if I get stuck, I got $10,000 worth of paint on that house that they're not going to pay me for. It's better if I have a $12,000 check cashed with $10,000 worth of paint on the house, and then we negotiate, how to finish it. But how do you put yourself in that position? And when I take her to meetings, I always make sure that when we walk out the door and on the ride home, that we're not talking about architecture. We're talking about, hey, you see where the client did that and they kind of wanted to push back there. That's pretty typical, and this is how you handle that. Or, those things that you're not going to learn in school, you're not going to learn anywhere. You're only going to learn it across the table from a client. But if you had somebody that's sat in that meeting 30 times already and then they explain it to you, it's a lot easier than you having to sit there for the next 10 years to understand how to resolve that issue or handle it. Right? It's that
yeah. It
experience that's
frees up.
that's a huge benefit.
It is, and that's the rocket fuel I was speaking of. I think it comes from having you're not burning mental calories trying to think about that stuff. You get to spend your calories thinking about other things to grow the company and to take it from where like when you start, like I spend a lot of time thinking about how to how do I get these pieces to fit together? Never mind work
Yes.
super efficiently together. And
Right.
so when you get to start when the company has all its pieces at least put together, now you get to optimize. Like I tried to join a business class called Breakthrough Academy. It's for like contractors, and it's
Yep.
I was right on the cusp of being the size to get in, and I joined it, and I found that it was not helpful for me at the time because I literally needed to build my pieces. They were talking about how to optimize how pieces work together, and I didn't have my systems put together yet. And so I had to take a
Right.
step back, and now we're working on building those systems. So I'm excited to see what your kids can do with taking what you've built, which was, is not the heart. It's just a different part. I mean, if not hard, it's a different
Yeah.
part. And being able
No,
to
no,
really
I'm very excited. I mean, I've had some mentors in my past that just said, look for the successful people and then just do what they do. Right?
yeah,
How do they handle themselves? How do they talk? It's like, you know, it, um, I'll search out solutions that are not architectural necessarily. Like I do a lot of public speaking at conferences and stuff like that. So like it's not beyond me on Sunday morning to watch a couple, preachers speak or whatever, but it's not because I'm trying to get their message. It's how is this guy captivating the 40,000 people in his audience? right? How is he getting them to pay attention? What is he doing? How does he talk? How does he send out that message? And because the message really doesn't matter, it's how is it delivered, right? And how do people respond to you and deliver it? Do you get up there with a sense of confidence and you talk about it, and or do you get up there like you're in fear? And I've had some friends that, we would do just like some regional meetings and stuff. And I remember this one, the guy was like nervous as hell. And I told him, I said, there's nobody in New England that knows this topic better than you do, right? You have nothing to be afraid of. Just get up there and talk about what you know and be confident. It'll shine through. And for like the first 3 minutes, you could see he was a little nervous, but then a couple questions came in. He threw out some answers, and people were like, oh, okay, I never thought of that. And then it kind of registered like, yeah, I do know this stuff. And it's maybe I shouldn't be afraid. And it's, yeah, it's exciting, but the answers are out there, and it's like how you can weave all this together to make it something is, it's always interesting to me. I'm more of a junkie about like success and the tipping points of things, and how do things become successful. Those are the stories that I really, really love to read about, and the books that I like to read about. How does that stuff matter? So, because
I'm
it's
a
easily
big fan of
translated.
that stuff as well. Because
Yeah.
you're right. Like Tim Ferriss has a podcast that is one of my favorite podcasts, and it's 3 hour long form. People who don't like it will say that it's very dry, but he's interviewing these like top performers and he's deconstructing them. And a lot of them you wouldn't get to hear this type of interview with. And it's cool to hear one or two. But what I really love is the overall, like what you get by listening to a lot of successful people is you start to see the trends through them, and
Hmm.
then I can start to I can implement those trends into my life with great confidence, knowing it'll pay off. Where like
Right.
one guy might say he wakes up at 6:32 and eats 2 eggs. Well, that's not something that, like, if every single successful person did that, okay, maybe I would wake up at
Yeah.
6:32 and eat 2 eggs. But I do really believe, like you said, in like not trying to reinvent the wheel, looking at successful people and trying to deconstruct what are they doing, and how can I take some of that and put it into my life. Um,
Right.
it's just that constant learning. And like you said, like none of this is rocket science. And it's fairly simple stuff, but that idea, I think you've made it pretty clear just in what you said, like that constant learning. People ask me like, oh, how did you get to what you're doing? And it's like, well, I'm just every day I'm trying to read a book. Last night I was reading a new book, and I'm listening to podcasts, and I found your stuff on social media and I follow that stuff. And I'm not going to build a house. I'm not going to ever design a house like that, but I like to understand those concepts. Um, it just
Right.
helps me be better at my job.
Yeah. I mean, for years I've been telling my kids, success breeds success. Right. If you're successful, all it is going to do is just sow more success for you. Right. Because someone out there is going to start talking about it. And there's no better marketing than third party marketing. Right. If I go around telling everybody ZK Painting is the best painter in New England, you can put out tens of $1,000s worth of ads, but it's not worth as much as me getting up in front and saying these guys are the best painters around, right? Because everybody expects you to say it, but
Yeah.
having that third party, and it's like once you understand how to be successful, then it's almost like a drug, right? You're striving for that next level of innovation or thought, that like, how do I break through this problem? It's like I know there's an answer, and how do I break through this? And then you get through that, and all you realize is every time you open a door, it just leads to a hallway of doors, right? It never leads you to the room. It's life is a consistent journey. You never get to the destination. There is no destination, I'm convinced, right? Because if there is, then that means you quit. right? And
Yeah.
you stop.
And as
And
humans, we don't even really like getting there. There's enough data now that I think people can look at their lives. Like it's the pursuit of happiness that makes us happy. It's not
yeah,
actually like when you go after a goal, it's that chasing of the goal that fulfills us and makes us like feel full. Think about how many times you have that big thing. Like one day, if I ever got to here, and you work so hard to get there, and then you get there, like it's never what you think it's going to be. But then you
yeah,
get that new thing, and that's where the real enjoyment comes. It's like, what's the next challenge I'm going to take on? That's what gets me going. And I think it's like you had alluded to it. It sort of is like like in Good to Great, they talk about the flywheel effect. And
mhm,
there's like the momentum that will come from like one little success and like one more and one more. And eventually you start to like train your body and your brain to just be a success machine. And then
right.
like you see it all the time. Like you said, tipping points. You see it's like overnight successes. It's like, no one's an overnight success. There might be 20
No,
years of
no,
grinding in the background.
yeah, yeah. It's that 10,000, what is it, 10,000 hour rule? Like you don't even know what the hell you're doing until you put in 10,000 hours. You can't even speak legitimately about what it is, system or whatever that you're doing, unless you've put in at least 10,000 hours, right? To get an understanding of it. And it's yeah, it's crazy. I just had a thought. I lost it. It'll come back to me. But that I was going to talk about before you sidetracked me.
Sorry, I
But
have a tendency to
no,
do
no,
that.
that's okay. Oh.
Um,
So I have to, as an architect, I have to consistently remind myself that, like, I will do a project, and like I'm doing this one now. We got some exciting ceilings and stuff. I'm sure you've seen me post them, that are all this clear fur and all this stuff. But it's like I love it, but I'm getting bored with the project. Like those ceilings have been installed. Yeah, we're putting in hardwood floor. Yeah, the kitchen's coming, but I'm on to the next project. Like there's not enough adrenaline pumping into me from this project now because we're kind of past the excitement level, right? We're cruising now to the finish line, and that has a certain level of boredom. And I have to remind myself, because even the homeowners sometimes are like, wow, you don't even seem excited today. No, I'm excited. I'm excited. And I have to kind of, play it up. But it's like, when you're first starting out and you're demoing, you're like, oh man, I can't wait to see this kitchen. I can't wait to see that wall of windows or whatever. But once the wall of windows are in, you're like, yeah, okay, let's go up the street to the other job because the wall of windows are in. I'm bored with this now. I've seen it. I need to move
yeah.
on. What's the next level stuff that we're doing? But we got to stay conscious of it and still be
That's where
excited for it. So
there's man, it might be called actually Rocket Fuel. There's a book where they talk about the implementer. I'm going to butcher the names, but it's like the ideas person and then the implementer person. And I'm 100% that visionary. I love to like come up with a plan and like start the ball rolling, but I'm not the best guy at pushing that ball across the finish line.
yeah,
Like the implementers, those people that they want to follow every letter of the law and they want to really like focus in the details, and that's what gets them going. Where what gets me
right,
going is the coming up with the idea and getting it going and thinking about all the things. And then, like you said, once the project is like smooth sailing, I'm lucky. I get to go on to the next one and sell the next one and think about how we're going to do the next one. Where I have a team in place where I have people who are really good at the follow through, and
yeah.
I'm really lucky that I've been able to understand that concept and look for those types of people and hire those types of people that can, like my assistant is a perfect example. Like she is the absolute opposite of me, and she's so good at like follow through, where that's definitely one of my like weak
But
points.
she probably doesn't want to think about it, right? She wants
No.
you to tell her, hey, go do this, and she will turn it into diamonds. But
Yes.
she's not the one to set the direction and set it in motion. And it's
Yeah.
funny that you say that, because when I think of all the good builders I work with, There's the owner that typically sells the project, and then like once we start construction, you very rarely see him, right? Because he's out whining and dining and selling the next project. And there's that one guy that's in the trailer or just on the job site every day scratching his head, and he's the one with the boatload of knowledge. And you know, the homeowner or the owner of the company realizes, yeah, that's my guy. He's the reason I'm successful. It's like I can sell the job, but without him, it would never get done, and certainly wouldn't get done to that level of success. And I think part of being that business owner is finding that person. Like how can you do that? And it doesn't necessarily have to be. I don't want it to sound like it's something below you. It's everybody has a certain set of skills, and everybody has a certain thing that they want to do, and there's certain things that they're good at, right? I mean, my daughter, she just graduated, but her modeling skills are killer. It's like she's up my game exponentially in showing clients, 3D photorealistic, imagery. And she doesn't, she's not designing the building. She doesn't know how to put that wall together necessarily, but she can build a model with the best of them. And so I can couple chicken scratches, build some stuff, give it to her, and then we walk into the meeting like, we're $1 million, and it's a team effort,
Yeah.
right? It's even like I remember seeing the last time Frank Lloyd Wright's all his drawings and models and stuff went through the country on a show. I was in college. This was early '90s, and I remember going there, but and realizing like all these great sketches and stuff, they weren't his. Like he sold the idea, he came up with the vision, but he had a woman in his office that was an extremely good artist. So she took his vision and turned it into gorgeous drawings and renderings. And it wasn't him, right? But the idea was his, but not the actual physical artistry. So everybody's got their somebody, right? If you think you
Yeah.
can do this all alone, you're mistaken. And the first bit of advice I would give anybody starting out at a business is take a long, hard look at yourself and understand what you're good at and understand what you suck at, and then figure out how you can excel at the things you're good at, but how do you find the right support for the things that you're not so good at? Because that's building the right team. And the last thing you want to do is hire somebody that has the same skills as you, because then you're both at a loss, right? You need that counterpart to solve it, which is it's like our podcast. I don't know if you're familiar, but we have the Unbuild It podcast, right? Peter Yost, myself, and Jake, and yeah, we crap all over each other because we're friends in the podcast. But the reality of it is that all three of us understand what each of us are doing, but we see it through three different sets of filters. And so even though we're looking at the same thing, right, I see things like, how is that going to look? How does it relate to the aesthetics? Peter looks at it and says, is that going to be able to dry? And Jake is going to sit there and say, well, how much does that cost? And is there a way to engineer it? But we're all looking at exactly the same detail. We're just looking at it differently. And I think that's part of why that podcast is successful, is that there's three of us that are looking and talking about the same thing, but we don't see it the same way. And that offers people different views because somebody out there can relate to one of us.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's way easier to take your strengths and double down on them and hire for your weaknesses than it is to take your weaknesses and try to get them up to average. And then your strengths don't get any better because you spend all your time trying to figure out your weaknesses. For a long time, I didn't get that concept. and you need to be everything to all the time. You have to be, you can't have those weaknesses. And it's like, no, I know I have some strengths. I'm going to double and triple down on them. And then I'm going to find people around me to make up for my weaknesses. Because that's what I looked at successful people, and that's what they were doing. It wasn't some genius epiphany. It was like, what are these other people doing?
Yeah, exactly. And I've had the ability, the chance and opportunity to work with some extremely successful people. And it's funny because I tell everybody this one story. I was working for this one guy he was CEO of an international finance company, like 14 offices around the world, and extremely smart gentleman. And I was doing a project with him that was kind of more like a hobby project, because he was living in a $25 million house that he built a couple of years ago, and this was a little hobby project of a property that he had. But I remember the first time I didn't agree with him, and I said, "No, I think you're wrong." And he looked at me like he's you know he's heard it before, but he was still kind of like, "Okay, I'm used to just people running and jumping and telling me that I'm right, and living with it." And when we kind of had our conversation, um, and I made my argument, and he's like, "Okay, I can see that," and blah blah blah. But kind of from that point on in the project, he would always say, "Well, I think we should do this, but let's get Steve's opinion." And when I came around or in a meeting, he would say, "Hey, we were talking about this the other day. What do you think about this?" But it hit me that this is why the guy was the CEO of an international finance company. It's not because he had all the answers. He knew what questions to ask, and he knew who to trust and who to put in that position to take care of the things that he couldn't take care of. And I think that's important in everything that we do. I work with general contractors that work with subs, and there's some out there that are really good general contractors, and then they have one or two subs that you kind of have to watch a little closer than some other subs. But everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and it's just trying to play the game and figure it out, make it work for you.
I love what you said there about actually standing up for, like, how successful it what you found standing up for yourself and knowing what you're talking about. I think as a lowly sub, as a paint contractor, a lot of like people do view my trade. They can look. It's easy to look down on painters, let's say, because everybody thinks they can do it. Everyone thinks and we have not done a lot as an industry to bolster our reputation. There's plenty of guys who are not a shining example of what paint contractors can be. So it's sort of a lot of things are going against us. And oftentimes I do have to say, like, every time I haven't said, this is like, I was telling a friend today, we had a project where we used a transparent stain, and I had recommended against it. And I said, it's not going to last very long. It has very little pigment. And they really liked the very little pigment part, and they ignored the it's not going to last very long part. Well, then they weren't happy when it didn't last very long, and it hurt the relationship to the point where we don't work with them anymore. And I looked at it and I was like I didn't stand up for myself, and just at the time I was a younger contractor and I hadn't had this mistake yet to learn from, and I just was like sort of trying to make them happy. And I was talking about this before, of like having those difficult conversations where it's just like, no, that I know that this is not what you want. You can even tell me that it's what you want, but I know it's not. So I'm willing to either do this, or like I'll never use it again. Like I will walk away from the next project the client insists on putting transparent stain on. And until I've been able to do that stuff in business, where I'll walk away if this isn't going to be a good fit for us. For a long time, I didn't have the luxury to do that. But once you do, you find like magically people start to treat you very differently. And it was like this thing, I had no idea how amazing it could be. Just standing up for yourself as an expert and going, no, this is, and then just being quiet and watching them completely transform the way they treat you. So I think there's a lot to be said for just like knowing what you're talking about, and then making it clear,
Yep.
and not letting people talk over you.
Another one I used to tell my kids that, growing up, I have three. They're 24, 23, and my son's about to turn 21, but they will tell you, like, their whole life, I would say, there's a whole nother world on the other side of fear, right? The fear of telling somebody, no, I won't do that. The fear of just getting over this or whatever it is. We have this fear in us that it's far more easy and comfortable to succumb to fear than it is to overpower it, right? But there is like you just said, there's a whole nother world on the other side of fear. And I experience the same thing. The minute you push back a little or you tell people, yeah, I mean, or you give them a price and they say, well, is there something that we can work with that? It's like, if I thought I could work it, don't you think I would have gave you a lower price? Like, that's what the cost is. And even with builders, I tell people, they're like, hey, can is there any way we can work that price? And I have a really good builder friend that, he's like, oh, let me go back and take a look at it. And I'm like, that's the dumbest thing you could do, because if you go back and you come up with a lower price, then you look like you were a criminal trying to rip them off, right? Because how all of a sudden did you find this lower price? Why didn't you give them the best price to do that job? It's either that, or now you've traded something in to get that lower price, and they're sitting there saying, well, what the hell did he do to take 20 grand off this price? Right? Am I not getting the same job? And I have one that's a painter story, a client that we were doing a design build. We had a particular builder, and then another client around the corner, again, design builder with the same builder. Well, the client around the corner hired a different builder. Like, all of a sudden, she's like, yeah, I sent the drawings to so-and-so. And I'm like, well, what about, Tommy? And she's like, well, I just thought we should get another price and blah, blah, blah. And this guy came in like $30,000 cheaper. And I was like, where do you think this guy is saving? When you go from 250 to 220, I mean, do you think the lumberyard's giving him a hell of a discount? I mean, where do you think $30,000 comes from? And then that client talked the one around the corner into it. And it was like probably 3/4 of the way through it, and that client around the corner fired the guy. And she said, Steve, you got to come over and walk through the house with my lawyer because I want to sue him and this and that. And, the paint job was, I mean, you would have been like, oh my God, my dog could have painted better tying a paintbrush to his tail and just having him, wag his tail across the wall. There were runs, drips, and everything, but the woman was crying. And I maybe sometimes I'm not nearly as sensitive as I should be, but I'm like, why are you crying? And she's like, I can't believe this happened. I said, where did you think, the $25,000 reduction comes from? This guy probably hired two kids that came over here after high school, after class, and painted these rooms. I mean, if he told me it was otherwise, then I would say the guy's either blind or something, because the job was horrendous. But that's how you save 25,000. Is you don't pay qualified people to do the work. You just find anybody to do that work, and then this is where you end up. And it's disgusting that and we're, everybody's to blame. There's the guy that undercuts you, but then there's the client that looks at it and says, instead of paying you $15,000 to paint this, oh, this other guy will do it for 11. It's like, well, how the hell is he saving $4,000? The house didn't change, or the painting scope didn't change. So where's that? Does he not want to make money, or what's the story? Where is this all coming from?
And the crazy thing is, like, it's often intelligent, successful human beings who run businesses,
Oh, yeah.
who know how costs work, but when it comes to painting and building, they'll just go, well, I often think, but yes, so they'll go, well, this guy's cheaper. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of times it's on the contractor. It's my fault for presenting myself as a paint contractor in a way that made you think that we were comparable. So, if my sales process looked pretty much the same as that other guy's sales process, and my estimate looked pretty much like the other guy's estimate, and my website looked pretty much the same, and my Google reviews are all pretty, like, if I didn't do something to separate myself from everybody else out there, then, or at least make it much easier for the client. Like, often our prices we're the highest price always. So I submit a bid for a price, and if you were to get other prices, like mine is way higher every time. Well, how do I get a client to hire me? Well, I better do a lot of things different than those other guys did,
Hmm.
because the paint job comes after the fact. After they hire me, they get to see the paint, right? Like, people hire builders and painters before any work ever gets done. So,
Right.
and oftentimes as a painter, I am always saying, like, I'm a recovering crafts person turned business person. Like, I love painting and nerding out about painting. And I used to think if I just gave you the perfect paint job, you would love me and you'd tell everybody about me and I'd be rich. And the truth is, like, the paint job comes at the very end. And if the customer experience isn't awesome and the sales and marketing process isn't awesome, the paint job, like, you don't even get to give the great paint job. So it's interesting. And then the worst part is, a lot of times those clients who try to save the money, I'll get those phone calls, right? We'll get the phone call, oh, the paint job's failing, blah, blah, blah. We don't ever, almost never do we do them, because the same mentality of the cheap person doesn't all of a sudden switch and go, well, now
Oh
I'm going to
no.
spend a bunch of money to have it fixed properly.
Yeah.
So
No. That.
it's a fascinating mentality, and I don't know where it comes from exactly.
Yeah. Trying to get them to see the value in it before they actually do it, and it's unfortunate too. The painter, you're entering the project where anxiety is already at an all-time high, right? I mean, the people are like, can you just freaking paint that room? Like, come this weekend so I can move in, a week early or whatever. And chances are they've already spent whatever contingency dollars that they had, and it's the wrong time, to be in there and trying to do that. It's a huge challenge of how do you do that? And it's one of those that I think you have to, the hardest thing would be is you have to stick to your guns there and say, listen, it's going to take us 16 days to paint this house out. And we can't do it in 14. We can't do it in 15 and a half. It's 16 days, and that's what it takes. And I'm always coaching my clients, like, oh man, I wish they moved faster. I was like, no, this is not when you want them to move faster. Everything that we're doing in these last 4 weeks of the project is everything you're going to touch and see for the next 20 years. We want to make sure that's absolutely perfect. So don't rush it. You've been living in your mother's basement for 18 weeks. Live there for 19. And then you're going to have 20 years of living in this house. Do not push to get in there a week early, and have that
God, we got to work
conversation
on a
with them.
project together. I want that being said to my clients at the end of a project. That is so nice just to hear that perspective, because, man, I feel like we don't get that a lot. Did Steve cut out?
You
There
got
he
to
is.
have the right stuff, and you got to have it right. I mean, again, painting is just another system that there's certain things you have to do, and you have to sand it, clean it, and then you have to wipe it down. You can't paint over all the sanding stuff. You can't save a day by doing that. And I remember I was on a project, and one of the painters, he had a guy going around with a metal spatula and on all the walls. And I was like, what are you doing? And he says, oh, run your hand on the plaster. You'll feel all these little bumps there. He's just cleaning up all these little bumps on the plaster and stuff. And I was like, holy crap, never thought of that before. And it's just, I mean, everybody's got their way of doing things and being successful, but there's also these people that they do. There's, I find it I find it very intriguing that there's passionate people in everything, right? Like, I mean, there's passionate people that are painters, and some people would say, yeah, like you said, some painters, they don't, the painting contractors don't necessarily get the credit that they deserve. And the same with architects. There's bad architects out there that charge a whole lot of money that don't do their job or do it halfway, and they rely on the builder to solve problems that they should have solved for. And everybody has their bad, but it's really intriguing. One of the other questions I always get asked is like, what's your favorite project? I said the one that was with good people and was a good journey, right? Because I would rather work with exceptional builders, the right client, good painters and masons and framers than to work on a 7,000 square foot house with no budget where everybody is just aggravated along the way. But that's not fun, right? I want to feed off everybody else's passion and hopefully they can feed off of mine, that we're all in it to stand there one day at the end for 2 minutes and say, yeah, we all did that. All right, let's do the next one now.
Yep. How
But
much
it
do
is.
you get into the building, the coatings in your spec sheet and all that stuff? Like, how much is coatings a thing you deal with, or is it more the building science behind it?
Yeah, I do more of the building science because the problem with the coatings in that is that every contractor has their painter, most of them, right? At least the good ones, and they have their one guy that they call, Felipe. Felipe's my painter. He does it, and Felipe does a great job for this particular builder, or whoever it is, and so you trust that Felipe has done his job, and you know, like me and like good builders and good plumbers, it costs a certain amount of money to be who we are, right? I'm sure you go to painting conferences, as boring as it may seem to some people, but going there and talking to some German company about these next generation coatings has got to be pretty exciting for you, right? To
Absolutely.
understand that these are, yeah, like you said earlier, nerd out on them. Everybody has that. It's like me getting the latest greatest modeling program like SketchUp or something. When that first came out, it's like, oh my god, look at this! I can stretch this, move this, change this with pretty much ease, and not have to. And it was a game changer. And but it's it costs a certain amount for us to be who we are, and then we have to in turn charge people for that, right? Because you're not getting Charlie in a pickup here that goes by Home Depot, picks up a couple brushes and a couple cans, and bangs out the bathroom and new master bedroom suite. You're getting somebody with some knowledge to do it right, and when you walk away, it's done right. Which another thing that I always found interesting that I have discussions with some builders is just this idea of punch list. It's a pet peeve of mine. But if you're a builder, like there's one builder that I know, and he's the kind of the one that set me off on this pet peeve track. But he said, I never use the word punch list because all that's really saying is, hey, wait a minute, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, you can't move in yet because it's not perfect. I made a bunch of mistakes that I'm going to correct. It's like, what the hell is that? You shouldn't have a punch list. It should be the house is either done or it's not done. The punch list is, yeah, we're not quite done, right? No, then that just means you're not done. If your painter's got to come in and touch some things up, or the finish carpenter's got to come in and put in the last couple pieces of molding or fix a couple of joints, then have them do that. The idea of punch list is baffling to me personally. That's like, I don't know.
It is. It's what's also baffling to me is how I think in my experience, a lot of the best paint contractors in the country aren't working for contractors. So to me, which is sad because the architects like yourself are relying on the painters from the contractors. And yet the best painters aren't working for the contractors. because of the whole game that's set up with price point and all these things like that. Like we just don't, we work with a small handful of builders because we're not going to compete on price with the other painters, or very few. There's a handful that we do, but for the most part we don't. So I find I get very frustrated with the new construction world because the painting is a sort of afterthought quite often, and it's just these beautiful custom homes get these average paint jobs as the standard. And it's something that we're working hard to try to change, with social media, with this podcast, with talking to architects. I had another architect on, and David Andriozzi, and we were talking about, I was going over like why Fine Paints of Europe is so special and why we use so much of it and what makes it different and blah, blah, blah. And how I see a lot of architects, we get plans from architects and they will be what I would call fundamentally wrong coating specified for surfaces. And he was like, well, why don't you, I love it. David's a great guy. He's like, why don't you just go to architects and tell them, hey, I'll come in and audit your paint spec. And I was like, I mean, I'd love to do that, but I don't know many architects would be like, oh, sure, come on in, audit our paint spec. We'd love to have you. But he's like, well, let's put together a white paper and we'll come up with a paint spec that kind of goes over some stuff. I do think, from my perspective, there is a bit of an issue with the way the industry is set up for new construction, the way the bidding process works and all that stuff like that. But I would imagine you're working in a world.
Do you ever get contracts where you contract with the homeowner directly because the builder, and this is baffling to me too, when I sit back and what's cool for me is over the 30 years, I've worked with a lot of builders, guys that I would consider exceptional, guys that are, have come up through the ranks of, they started out doing decks and then they did a small sunroom, then they redid a kitchen, and then they did, a kitchen family room addition and master bedroom suite, and then they might have built a house or two, but they came up through the ranks. And I always find it interesting that there's some builders I know that will tell the homeowner, hey, here's two painters that do a good job. I'll just let you contract with them directly because I don't want to be involved in it. And I was like, and then there's the builder that's very successful, and he's like, I want everything to go through me because I want to be responsible for everything. Painters, landscapers, everybody. You come to me, I give you everything you need for this house. It's one-stop shopping. And then there's the builders that, just here's the name of a couple landscapers we've used in the past, or here's a tree guy. Why don't you have him do it? And I'd sit there and some of these builders I'm really good friends with, and I was like, so you're telling me that instead of getting a number from the tree guy of $5,000 to remove those trees, and then going to the homeowner and saying, hey, it's going to cost $6,000 to get rid of those trees, and you get paid $1,000 to manage that job, as opposed to you just turn it on for them, and then all of a sudden that guy is now using it as an excuse. Oh yeah, my foundation guy had to go somewhere else because the trees weren't taken out in time. And now the homeowner's pissed, and he's like, well, hey, it was your tree guy. And it's like, well, like, are you in charge or are you not in charge? What's the story here? I don't know. It's kind of baffling to me, but painting is definitely one of those.
Yeah. And in my case, we just don't do very much new construction, but when we do stuff, remodels and stuff, like there will be times where we work directly for the client because the client has decided they want. And a lot of times we get brought in because of what we do could be considered a specialty finish, just high end fine finish stuff. And there'll be another painter on site, and we'll do, like that project. We did the handrails and a couple rooms and the island, and then the other painter painted the rest of the place. So we, in that case, we're working for the client because they brought us in. It's just interesting because the a lot of times the GC model is, I have to get budget. I've done this in the past, and hey, can you get me budget numbers for X, this project? Okay. Well, then the other two GCs, they're getting budget numbers from their painters for that project, and then they're going to bid. And if you come to me for your budget numbers for that project, a lot of times, like, and that's where it's like, I need a face to face with the client. I need to understand, what do you really want? How do I tailor a paint job to meet your needs? I'm not just going to give you this like cookie cutter thing, because you're building a beautiful custom home. Don't I mean
Right.
Everything else in this has been well thought out and many options weighed. Why is the paint just considered just paint it? I don't know. It's something. I think I know we also offer some things that aren't standard, and so it makes it where, like, if you ask me for my A level work, it's going to be significantly different than the average painter's A level high end work. And
Right.
I don't know. We definitely struggle with the new construction stuff though. And oftentimes I feel like clients are getting let down on the high end new construction with as far as coatings
Yeah,
go.
well, paint just doesn't have the priority that the custom kitchen cabinets or the appliances do, or that. It just doesn't. It just doesn't have that priority. And it's sad because people always ask, how much does that cost a square foot, or this or that, and it's like I tell even my own clients, I tell them good things cost money. You know,
Every
they
time.
say, hey, can you do this? Oh yeah, we can find a guy to build that skylight, and you come back and it's like, yeah, that skylight's 12 grand. Holy crap! Hey, it's 2 foot by 12 foot long, custom. It's beautiful. It's going to look awesome in that space. Good things cost money,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and the funny thing is a lot of my clients, I'm familiar with what their job is. Now they don't have a problem charging through the nose for their services, right? Oh yeah, I'm worth it, but then they don't want to pay it to somebody's that's
Yeah.
worth it for their what they do, which I always find pretty interesting. But I think that's human nature because I mean I've done some work in my house. I had built some friends that are builder, and they pull up and they pull off a couple planks of Versatex or something off of their truck, and then they hand me a bill for $600, and it was like 4 boards. They're like, yeah, this stuff costs money. It ain't cheap. And I was like, holy crap. It's like now I got to pay $600, and the guy, he carried it all in one load to the backyard. I was like, holy crap, you know.
It's
But
also the problem. I think one of the issues that I see as a painter is, yeah, we're at the end, like you said, like we face some serious budget pressures and time pressures, but also like 99% of GCs I know are carpenters turned general contractors. Like they love the wood. They'll nerd out about the different copings and all the things, and they spend all this time and energy and money on millwork stuff because that's what they love. That's what they know. And like I know I've heard of like one GC that used to be a painter, and I've always thought one day maybe I'll get into GC work, and all my houses will have the nicest paint jobs.
yeah, but they'll put up $40,000 worth of millwork, and then they'll put a $3,000 paint job on it, and it's like, what are you, stupid? It's like I run into that exactly same thing scenario, just different ways. Like I'll use these triple glazed European windows, and we'll spend, you know, $70,000-$80,000 on the house, and then the contractor is like, "Hey, can I substitute and use this tape?" And I'm like, "Why do you want to do that?" "Well, I can save $400." And I'm like, "So let me get this right. We're going to spend $80,000 on windows, and you're going to save $400 by going to a lesser grade tape to protect the flashing and installation of these windows." I said, "Are you retarded?" "No, we're not going to do that."
Yeah.
I don't know. It's crazy. And I got a question for you as a painter, because I run into this not quite often. There was one painter that used to get under my skin all the time. I did a lot of work with this one builder, and this guy was his painter. And the homeowner sometimes, okay, my daughter Sally's room, we'll let Sally pick out the paint color. Where you paint, she picks out the paint. You tell them, hey, just paint like a 2 foot square so we can get a sense of the color. And you go in there and he paints the whole wall, and it's like, why didn't you just paint the 2 foot square? And it's like, I'm not going to waste my time with that. You just paint the wall so you can see it. And he would get all frustrated. And then it would look like Pepto Bismol. So you'd say, well, we're going to change the paint color. And he'd roll his eyes in the meeting and he'd get all frustrated. And it's like, you're a freaking painter. Why are you complaining about being a painter? If the homeowner wants to pay you 10 times to repaint that wall, then repaint it 10 times. Or here's a thought, don't be a painter if you don't want to paint.
Absolutely. I love it. I'm here to serve my clients. All I ever want to do is make my clients happy and give them a great product.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I see it. And like my ideal client for a long time has been the analytical buyer, the person who wants to really understand all the data behind why are you doing what you're doing, then they want to sleep on it for some time, and then they make their decision. And I didn't know all that stuff. Those were the guys who hired me before, because I am very like the chemistry behind the coatings. Why are we doing what we're doing? Like, that's what I love to talk about. I have a freaking painting podcast. Like, I like to talk about painting.
Yeah.
And so, and I just had a very long conversation with the client, like hour and 45 minutes. And he was asking me every little tiny thing. Right. And I was really actually enjoying it. Like, it was really long and we did beat some topics like a dead horse, but he understood every chemistry type of chemical we were going to wash his house with, you name it. We went there. But the GC wanted nothing to do with it. And they actually walked away from the client and like moved on, because they didn't want to, that's not their type of sales process. They want to be, he's like, and I think that everyone has their different stuff, but that's what I live for. But at the end of the day, I also know, like, that guy's going to pay what it costs to do what he wants done. And he made that very clear.
Yeah.
But not everybody wants to really go deep like that.
No, and it's the, I'm here as a painter. My job is to serve my clients' finishes wish, right? And that same painter, we had in there, and it was a new house, and he might have had like, okay, 4 different colors or something. And then the homeowner is like, well, we decided we're going to paint the laundry room this color, and we're going to paint this other color. And he's like getting all bitchy about, oh, I only have 4 colors in my contract. It's like, okay, just charge them for the extra 2. They know they're going to do it. And then it's like, well, for the outside, she's not sure. Can you get just a couple small cans and paint these 4 colors over on the west side of the garage so we can check it out? And it's funny because with that painter, he does it like all pissy, him and Han, 4 friggin' colors. You can't pick a color. They all look the same. It's like, just pick one, lady, so I can paint your house. And it's like, really? And then I work with some really good builders, and their painter, you go around the corner and there's not 4 colors, there's 6, because he sits there and says, well, I know you wanted these 4, but I think these 2 might have been closer to what we talked about. So I got a couple samples of that, and I put those up there too. And it's like, where has this guy been all my life? Right?
Well, you know
I'm
what
over
the biggest
there
difference
arguing.
is? The difference in those two guys, I'll tell you right now, it's price. That,
Yeah.
like 9 times out of 10, the difference between those two guys is one guy is either getting grinded down on price, or he's grinding himself down on price. He doesn't know or believe he can charge more, and he's sure not delivering more. So it's kind of a catch-22. But those are the cheap guys. Those guys, he's not making any money painting every day for a living, right? He's being grinded down by the system or by himself or who knows what. And then the guy over here, like, we charge what it costs. We're glad to go the extra mile. I have it in my budget to do things like, let's do sample boards. Great. No problem.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a problem. I didn't get grinded down to every little tiny penny. And now I'm being asked to do more. And I think that there's a big difference in getting, when you pay somebody what they're worth, and you pay them like it's fair, and that those GCs that take good care of their painters versus the GCs, which a lot of GCs will grind their painters. And
Right.
I know a lot of painters that work for GCs, and I just feel bad for them because they're not making any money. They're chasing their tail. They're working so hard for the next one, for the next one. They have all this volume and they don't make any money, and they're not appreciated. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It's an interesting system, this new construction stuff, especially
Hmm.
as it relates to painting.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, and yeah, I don't, I mean, it's totally perspective too, because if we pick the right client in the beginning, then their their thoughts should align with yours in that the project should be a fun journey, right? And if a fun journey means you paint 3 blues on my son's wall, so we get to pick it out, and I get to crack jokes with my son and have him pick it out and get excited over, yeah, that's the same blue as the Red Sox jersey, or the same. I mean, we did one that it was the actual red that the Red Sox like red is, and they painted it, or painted the same color as the Green Monster, whatever. But that's like the exciting stuff. That's why we're doing what we do. Nobody wants to get up there and just slap paint on, and it's like, hey lady, pick a color so I can friggin' paint the house. That's not fun. Why even wake up and go to work that day if that's what your
Yeah.
work day is like? It's not. And I have the same thing. It's like, and sometimes it is. I admit that it is frustrating. It's like you come up with a good design scheme or something, and I'm all excited. I go to the meeting, and they're like, "Yeah, that's not really what we were thinking." And it's like, "Oh, here we go," And then you get the, "Well, I was at my sister's for Thanksgiving last week, and in her family room, she has this," and it's like, "Okay, let's rebuild your sister's family room because you can't think on your own, so we'll just rebuild what she has." And but anyways, it's finding the right client. You'll love this. One of the builders, he's been in the business 35 years. He's about to retire, but he told me years ago. He said, "Steve," he goes, "the best advice I could give you is, I've had a handful of clients that I wish I paid $500 to go away. I would have made more money."
Yep. I
So
I'm
it's
fine
choosing that
tuning.
right client.
Yeah. I'm working that muscle, that filter. I just had
Yeah,
one that really changed the data point and refined my filter, and I'll protect myself against more clients like that in the future. But
yeah,
you have to make some mistakes to get there. But I think
yep,
being able to walk away, or like you said, have a hard conversation and tell someone the honest truth, and be able to walk away. Like people ask me a lot, like painters will contact me, and it's like the first thing always is have more work than you can handle in a way that where you can be able to say no, or this is my price. I can't do it for
right,
less. Or, oh, you want me to cut that corner? I can't. Like, you're gonna have to call somebody else. You want me to paint outside when it's 30 degrees? Hey, you'll find a painter who'll do it. It's just not gonna be me. But
right,
if you haven't stayed small enough, smaller than your demand, then you'll need work, and then you'll be a grumpy guy putting samples on because you didn't charge enough.
right. No, exactly, exactly. It's I mean, it's an interesting industry. I wake up every day excited. I'm like, I just can't wait for what today will bring, because I'm sure something new is going to come across the desk that I've never seen before or never had, or in good and bad, right? It's not necessarily bad things, and it's the builders and craftspeople out there that just think that mistakes don't happen. We talked about it earlier about being imperfect. It's like, hey, if you think you can build a 5,000 square foot house in 12 months, and something isn't going to show up late or show up broken, or someone's going to make a mistake reading a dimension or something, you're pretty naive to think that those things aren't going to happen. Of course, they're going to happen. I tell my clients when we're interviewing builders at the front, I said, you want someone that's going to react to the problem the way you want them to react to the problem. Don't believe anybody that says they don't have problems, because that person doesn't exist. You're going to have problems. You just want the guy that knows how to react to them, and isn't a, I jokingly tell some of my clients, I said, yeah, that builder, he's a fireman, right? He's rushing over here, he puts that fire out, and then he's got to rush over there and put that fire out, because he has no sense of planning or organization or anything to allow for it. He's, like you said, chasing his tail for his whole career, and he never really gets anywhere. You're better off
all
instead
the
of
best
doing.
builders I know, sorry, they
No, that's
all
okay.
seem to be these like insanely like mellow, calm dudes that like nothing rattles them. They're just
Yeah,
always calm. And like you said,
yeah.
those are not guys who are putting out fires. Like those guys are steady eddies. They have plans in place. That's like nothing. Like the building could be burning down, and they're gonna go. All right, the building's burning down. What do you want me to do? Call the fire department. Like,
Yeah.
and then you meet the builders that were like, or really any business, this is probably true, but builders especially because of all the things, the GCs that are all over the place. Yeah, it's a lot more stressful to try to do that. And I think the same thing is true for in painting, like in what I do. Like the calmer and the more like slow and steady I approach this whole thing,
Hmm.
like the more success I have.
Yeah. And expectations. I mean, I'm a huge, pusher of trying to manage expectations. I tell everybody, you could call yourself a painter, a plumber, electrician, an architect, builder, foundation guy, landscaper, whatever. What it comes down to is people put a certain amount of money up and they expect a certain value in return. And if we don't deliver that and the expectations aren't met, then there's problems. And our whole business is about managing those expectations. That's success versus failure. You could charge whatever you want. I know a builder that I have been in a meeting, and he stood up and he told the homeowner straight in the face. He says, my business is set up to charge, anywhere from $800 a square foot upward. I cannot do a project for less than that. If you keep pushing me to try and get that number below that, tell me now, because I'm ready to walk out the door. And I was like, okay, now that's somebody that just drew a line in the sand. But he set it was a little harsh, but he set the expectations. It's like, stop dicking me around. This is what I can do, and I can do it exceptionally well. But you get a certain value, and that value costs a certain amount. And if you're not willing to pay for it, then I'm going to take my value and I'm going to walk my fanny out the door and go get the next cheaper guy. And good luck, because you're not getting the same service. And we all want to be able to do that. And he's very fortunate that he's built a legitimate reputation where if he says he's going to do something, he does it. Right? If he says, I'm going to have 10 painters here and we're going to be painting that on Monday, 99.9 times out of 100, those 10 painters are going to show up on Monday. He's going to have them there, and they're going to do it.
yeah,
Or he's going to look for a different painter, right? Because the values that he imposes on his clients, he also imposes on the people that work for him, which that's the whole system of success, right? That what you're asked to be, that what you offer to do, you also have to be willing to pressure somebody, just like you. I mean, if you say, I can give you the best paint system, then you have to look at the European paint company and say, you have to give me the best paints possible and train me how to use them and give me the knowledge and understanding so that I can be my best and be the best painter here, because I'm going to go out and say I'm the best painter and I'm going to charge like I'm the best painter. But I can't do that unless my support system is doing the same value judgment that I'm doing.
totally. Is that GC in New England?
Yes, he's in the Boston
I
area.
like to
I
meet
mean,
that.
if you
I
were,
like the guy.
if you were building a house for, 15, 20 million or more, he would be on your short list every time.
I have a guess, but I won't say it. I heard you worked with some builders and you did some garages.
Yeah, and I've done, initially did some garages and stuff, but that same builder that I worked with 22 years ago, he still comes to me and says, Steve, I know this is boring to you, but I have this one project that these are some people that are in town. They want me to do a garage with a room, an office above or something. Can you, would you want to do it? I'm like, sure. And he's like, really? And I'm like, I treat it like you helped me become who I am. So why wouldn't I continue to help you? Just because I did that $1 million house last year doesn't mean I'm above doing a garage for you. I tell all the builders, and probably 90% of my work is through half a dozen builders, right? That I just do all of their work. We team up with, and I tell them, I said, we're a team. That's why we're successful. If we're doing a garage, but I'll do the garage for you. Just don't forget me when you get the client that wants the $1.5 million house. That, the loyalty has to be there both ways. So we're still bang out little, $120,000 kitchen remodel, or, new garage and mudroom added on to the side of the house. And actually it's also revived it having my daughter, because those are great projects for her to cut her teeth on, right? That I can get those projects all day. Like, people in
Yeah.
town here, oh, we want to put a family room off the back or whatever. It's like, yeah, we'll go get that, and then I'll just watch over my daughter's shoulder while she does that project, and I can concentrate on the other stuff.
Does she
And she
have
gets experience.
ideas or designs on going and taking on those big $12 million houses at
I mean,
some point?
yeah, she's
Is that
excited to get there. She's smart enough to know that she really doesn't have the answers, and it's interesting because it's like, I mean, it would be no different than if I came down to your shop and said, yeah, I want to paint that handrail that you guys did today, and you just give me the bucket and the brush and say, yeah, go have at it. I wouldn't have a freaking clue on how to get that mirrored finish on there, right? Or how to get to that level. And sometimes I jokingly, like, if I'm going away for the afternoon, going out to the vineyard or something to look at a project, I'll say, you know what? Here's the project book for this new project. Why don't you work up 2 or 3 schemes this afternoon, knowing that I'm going to come back and she's not going to have a scheme because she just gets lost in it. And it's kind of an eye opener that it's not easy, and we
yeah?
have to develop patterns for success, and we have to understand. And it's not something that you went to school for 6 years. It just means you walk in the door. It's just like me walking into your shop thinking because I can hold a paintbrush and open the can that I'm a painter. I'm not. There's a
And you
certain
watch me on
level of
Instagram,
skill. Yeah,
so you
and
should definitely know how, right? I saw you do
yeah,
it on Instagram.
yeah. How hard can it be? I watched that YouTube video. I mean, it's
Yeah,
painting. How hard can it be? Or drywall.
yeah.
I mean, I tell her all the time, we'll be walking through. We were walking through the other day and there were a couple of guys plastering. And I said, just stand here and watch that guy, because it looks easy. But if you went over there and he handed you that pallet full of plaster and that trowel, you would be lost. You would not figure it out. And it's just, there's a talent there. But it's no different than when, if I gave somebody, hey, here's a 2 acre site and then here's a program for the house. We want a kitchen, family room, 4 bedrooms and stuff. Well, here, go design this house. It's, people would sit there and go, where do I start? Like, where's the first line, right? How do I write this story? We all have our experiences, and that's what makes our lives passionate and great, right? That we get to experience all that. But anyway,
Yeah. Well,
exciting stuff.
so this has been amazing. I really appreciate it. We have some questions that we ask at the end of every ZK Live.
I
We
should
kind
have
of
should have
they're
watched
brought.
some of them.
Yeah. Well, the last one is really fun, so we're gonna
All right,
dig deep
I'm
on you
up
on
for
that
it.
one.
I
But
love
the
it. I love it.
good. The first two are much more fun. So we have I'm going to need a DIY tip for you for people who are trying to do some sort of design. Um, in your case, maybe it's not a great idea because I don't know, people should be doing architecture DIY, but
Well, I'll
a
give you
lot of people
one.
do painting
I have an
DIY.
answer to
Yeah.
this, I'll tell you what. It is part of my secret sauce. So there's some privilege in getting what I'm about to say, because this is really taking you into the vault and help you understand. But the minute I tell clients in a meeting what I'm about to tell you, you can see the bells go off and the understanding is clear. When you're designing a house, you can think of the names of the rooms: kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, laundry, living room. That's totally semantics. There's two types of rooms in a house. Where's my fingers there? Two types. There's hallways and destinations. There's rooms I go to be in that room, and there's rooms that I'm willing to travel through that I don't care about circulation. And I'll give you a couple examples. I was in this one house. It was a family room, probably close to 28-foot square. And I looked at the builder, and I didn't design the house. I was there. We were at some other project. He's like, "Come on, I'll show you this house that I'm building." And we went in, and I was like, "Yeah, it's a nice house, but this is a house that's designed to look nice, not perform well." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Okay, we're in a family room. It's about 28 foot by like 24." I said, "Here's a question. Where would you put the TV and where would you put the couch?" And he couldn't answer it. And I said, "That's because this room is a 500 square foot hallway. You have all those patio doors out to the pool. You have all of this here that is visual access to the kitchen and the island. Over here, you have the stairway and whatever, but there was like no place to put furniture in this room. It was a giant like town square in the middle of the house, and it was clearly a hallway. And family rooms are rooms that I want to go to. I don't want kids coming in a door and running in front of the TV, when I'm trying to sit there and watch football on Sunday. It's like, put that door somewhere else in the hallway. Dining rooms make good hallways because they have circulation requirements around the table. Like, you have to have access to every chair. So by default, dining rooms are hallways, right? They're just big hallways that you put a table in and people move around. Kitchens make good hallways. But family rooms, bedrooms, those are destinations, right? You don't want to confuse the two, and that's where houses start to fail, is when destinations become hallways and hallways become destinations. If you break it, if you just look at the house that way and how I'm going to use it, you'll get your exponential understanding of what you're doing.
That was a tremendous answer. I love it. I'm now going to look at every single building I walk into and critique it based off of that framework. So
There you go.
that's a great tip.
It is that simple.
All right. So how about, what is your favorite piece of design paraphernalia? It could be a tool, a piece of software, anything.
So that's a toss up, because I love the ink pen. Like, I can just sit there and it's not like a formal sketch. It's almost like, if if I was a writer and I just tap the keys on the keyboard to hear them, it's like there's mental progress happening that kind of primes the engine. So it's like, maybe it isn't even the ink pen. It's in front of my keyboard. I always have a pad of graph paper, because I'm always jotting down a dimension or a number, or I'll look at something and I'll just do a really quick, like, not even an understanding sketch, but it's like a mental progression. And so I need that piece of paper, because if I don't, it's like it's my security blanket, right? It's what keeps my mind flowing, by having that piece of paper. Because, and it's one of those things too, that a lot of times things just, you get these mental blocks that I can't get over. So if I draw a sketch that doesn't even mean anything, it allows my mind to free itself of that idea and open the gate to the next idea.
Love it. So an ink pen and graph paper.
Yeah, I always have a
Tremendous.
piece of paper, and I told my daughter, like, the first day, I'm like, always have a piece of paper there in front of you, because the phone's going to ring. You need to jot down a number, or you're working on a building section and you need that height because you need to go over here to the window schedule and need that, so you can jot down that number. But you need that security blanket. Yep,
Love it.
or at least I
All
do.
right, now the best question. So you we anyone who's listening that knows you knows that you are very good at what you do. You're clearly demonstrated your expertise in the last hour and a half. So now I need you to humble. We got to bring you back down to reality, and we need to hear like a horror story, like the worst, biggest mistake that you ever made on a project.
So one of the things that I absolutely hate is revising drawings. It's a huge pet peeve of mine. And I like to work at a level of progression where I hope we're not changing major things. But we had this one client, and the builder was part of the problem. And believe it or not, we ended up, the main house was in the right place, but this carport, the foundation was poured 2 feet off. It was poured and it was cast in the wrong place. And the builder never picked up on it, and I didn't. And it was like 4 weeks of just shuffling this. Hey, move this over a foot. No, let's extend it out 18 inches. Let's do this, move this on the inside. And for whatever reason, the floor plan and the foundation plan weren't coordinated, and we were off by 2 feet on a couple piers. And it didn't make a huge difference. It, the builder and I were like, oh my God, we were fretting over it, because the whole idea of this carport was the guy had this tractor that he wanted to put under the cover and blah, 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 blah. And the builder was like, oh my God, we got to take this foundation out. We got to move this. We got to change that. And I was like, let's just go to the homeowner and explain what we did. It's like, we've had excessive revisions here, and yeah, okay, we should have caught it. I should have had it right, but you checking the drawings and all of that, you should have picked up on it too. And we're both there. You know what the homeowner said? He said, oh, it's no problem. I changed my mind. I'm going to put the tractor. I'm going to get, I'm going to put up one of these little steel buildings out back here, and we're going to put the tractor in that anyway. So yeah, just we'll leave the carport right there. It's fine. It doesn't have to be the 26 feet. It's fine at 24 feet or whatever it was. And it did it. But it was, from that point on, like we talked about earlier with mistakes, two things that scare the hell out of me: foundation plans and window schedules, because both of them are big ticket items that once you say, here's the green light, there's no turning back, right? The
Yeah.
concrete it's going in. And I just did this house up on the coast that is close to 7,000 square feet. And the foundation had probably 30 different elevations of footings, wall heights, slabs, partial crawl space, basement, depressed areas for the fitness room, all of this stuff. And I literally built a SketchUp model of the whole foundation, fully dimensioned it. Like, I built it virtually exactly the way we would build it in real life. And then I turned all those drawings over to the builder, and he's like, what's this? And I said, give these to the foundation guy. It is everything he needs to know about this foundation, and it's in 3D. And he's like, oh my God, that just saved him hours of time. And I was like, well, it put confidence in me too, because, that's I don't know, it's probably on the order of like 80 or 90K for this foundation. And if it was poured wrong, it's, these aren't clients you want to go to and say, oh, I know you trusted us, but yeah, we screwed up.
Especially early in the process.
Yeah.
The house isn't even
And
up
then
yet. We just dug a hole.
yeah. And there's things that, when you look back, but it's like, I can't beat myself up about it. But I mean, it's like, if you think back at the way you prepped the first 3 paint jobs you ever did, you probably don't do that way anymore, right?
Yeah.
You look at that and go, God, I was a friggin' amateur there. And it's funny because I have a lot of projects I can drive by and say, I mean, just in the town I live in, I probably have 60 projects. And some of them, it's funny because some of them I drive by and go, yeah, I'd probably not do that anymore that way. But there is two or three, and I go, that project's friggin' 20 years old, and I wouldn't change a thing with 20 years of experience. It is exactly the way I would have done it now. And it's only one or two of them, but then there's a handful that I'd say, yeah, I'd probably change it, but that's experience, right? That's
Yeah.
who we are, and those people didn't pay. They got a fair value for what they paid.
Well, I have to say I'm disappointed. I thought you might have a story about a house that completely collapsed because the architecture was so bad.
No,
No, I didn't actually think that.
I didn't have a building collapse. I don't.
How about
I mean,
what's the worst? What's the worst you saw at Building Science Corporation? Like, what was the biggest mistake you ever saw there? You probably saw some
oh,
crazy
I mean,
things.
yeah, I mean, we went out to Chicago and there was, a double-digit $1 million house that people couldn't even move into that had water problems. But probably one of the more disgusting things was when I was there, we were at the height of mold problems with vinyl wall covering on the inside in southern climates. And so we would go down and go to, someplace in Florida to a hotel or whatever, and we would peel back this vinyl wall covering that was literally a mold farm. Like, it was so disgusting. And then we would sit there and joke, me and the other gentleman, Neil, and be like, yeah, someone slept in this room last night on that bed. And it's like, are you kidding me? And I do have it's a crazy story. I was traveling with a woman that I worked with at Building Science Corporation. We were out in I want to say like Reno or Sacramento. We were out in that area, and I hear all this hype. It's like the police and all this stuff, and I was like, "What the hell is going on in her room?" And come to find out, she woke up in the middle of the night and like turned the light on in the bathroom, and there was like a 7-foot boa constrictor on the floor. And the hotel was a let's just say a very modestly priced place. Okay. But the story is like 2 or 3 days earlier, like this reptile guy was staying there for a couple days, lost the snake and didn't tell anybody. And it like went and hid in the toe kick of the cabinet. And he just left. And so she's in there and she turns on the light and this thing kind of like turns around and looks at her and she's like, I mean, a lot of women would have been like screaming. She just kind of like shut the light off, walked out of the room and went to the front desk and told them, said, hey, there's like a 7-foot snake in my bathroom. Can we have somebody, get rid of it? And so I would have been freaking. Snakes. I could take a lot of things. There's not enough bullets in the world for snakes in my world. So, but I mean, that's like one of the most outrageous stories that I've ever heard about hotels. It was funny.
Crazy.
Anyway.
Well, Steve, thanks again. I really appreciate the time. It was awesome.
I appreciate you having me, man. This is great. This is great. And I got to come down and see some of that stuff because that when I looked at those railings on Instagram today, and I was like, how the hell do you even paint that? Like, how do you get? It was like a mirror. That stuff was gorgeous, man. And I know you were up here working with Brian on that deck project, and you made that look like $1 million. That
Yeah.
your guys had their system, one guy on the outside, one guy on the inside, and they just roll through it, and the place looked awesome.
The best part is we're going to maintain that wood every 2 to 3 years, and it will look just like that forever. and no one will ever have to strip that wood down to bare wood. It will never be all ugly, because from the very beginning, we have the right product in place. The Armstrong Clark stain is the right product, and it's going to be maintained. And it won't be super expensive to maintain it, and it will always look beautiful. And too often, exterior stain gets done, and it doesn't get maintained. And then I get the phone call, and it's this big, huge project now of stripping everything down and like the whole deal. So I love to get to start from scratch with builds like that and put exterior stain on, because now I know, like I put it in my calendar for 2 years from now that we will be reaching out to say, hey, it's been 2 years. We need to restain. I would suggest you do. I mean, you don't have to do anything, but I'm going to suggest that we restain this deck. So yeah,
awesome.
that was really cool.
You just became a huge resource for me, so now I know who to call.
I'm a huge paint nerd. I've consulted with a few people on getting the coatings that the client wanted, even if we didn't do the work. Yeah, man, call me anytime.
That's awesome. And
I won't bug you too much because I have Kyle in my backyard. So
no, you can call me. I mean, I'm actually doing a passive house down there with Steve Demetric here that we're going to be starting real soon. So
I'd love to. Next time you're down, give me a call and I'd love to come check it out.
Yeah,
or have you by the shop one way or another. I'd like to meet Steve at some point too. I've heard good things.
He's a great guy.
Cool, man.
Does good work. Awesome. Well, thank you, sir.
Awesome. Thank you.